meeting for Thursday, October 10th of the Grafton Sustainability Commission. Call the meeting to order. Do my official knock on wood. So I wanted to use this meeting as a status update for everybody on the research. I know there were a few people that couldn't be here tonight. Mark is out, and maybe a couple other people, but I know that we had left last time and I was sending out the memo and we were going to divide up into teams. We've done that. There were some questions along the way about going about the data gathering from the other communities and how exactly to do that. And it seemed like as I was reviewing the things that, particularly on the school side, that we put up, that Amy had done an excellent job with it, and Barry as well. I want to go through what everybody has, and to the extent there are questions, we can answer those questions, and if there are any blanks that we need to fill in, go ahead and fill in the blanks, and then reconvene in a couple weeks. The goal after that is going to be to marshal all the data that we have, and between, I think myself, Amy, and Barry, come up with a draft of the benchmarking report, reconvene again in mid-November to go over the benchmarking report and then publish the benchmarking report. In the interim, between now and the publishing of the benchmarking report, we're going to want to give specific assignments on accomplishing our other goals about capital structure, municipal cost structure, school cost structure, and income especially. I will tell you that I got projections back from the town administrator's office today, and very helpfully, actually, the town administrator took my suggestion from last year and produced a couple of different scenarios. And of the two scenarios, the biggest difference between them is how we fund the school side. Mm-hmm. Okay. There are a couple other smaller differences, but that's the large one. The schools have asked this year for FY21 initially for a 5.9% increase in their overall budget from last year, which is up slightly from the 525 that we had promised to fund them at from 2014 forward, but also bearing in mind that there were a couple of years in there, in particular last year, where we didn't do that. We funded them at a lower percentage. And if you fund them at the 5.9 that they asked for this year, we're looking at a $788,000 deficit. Now, that would be one thing if it were just for this year, but the following year, the superintendent projected needing something along the lines of a 4.5% increase, and the year after that, 4.25%. Again, historically smaller increases than we have been giving them since 2014. And certainly, actually, before 2014, there were two straight years where we were about 7.5% increases per year. With those percentage increases, we would be steadily looking at an operating deficit of about $1.2 million in FY22, $2.3 million in FY23, and on down the line. So this is where the old structural deficit is rearing its ugly head. We simply can't. We don't have the income to match service levels, and if we give the schools what they say they need in order to provide the service that they are currently providing, we're going to have to fix something. Conversely, on the second budget scenario, if we fund the schools at about 2% per year, we'll be fluid through FY25. All right. Now, I will leave the Jay and the school department to make the case about what would happen in the event if you actually funded the schools at 2% increase. Teacher salaries raise at an average of about 4.1% per year, I believe. So that alone, as you can see, we wouldn't have enough money to keep the program as it presently is. So this is why this work is important, and this is why we have a sense of urgency here. So with that having been said, Amy, would you like to go first on showing us the spreadsheet you got? Were you guys able to figure out the screen with the...
Oh,
Yes,
Put it up there?
yeah. You
He's
can only
got his
drive
stuff.
from here.
Okay.
You cannot
I
drive from
made
there.
paper copies.
You have
because-
paper. Good.
And I'm gonna give one to
Bear
Sue.
with paper. There you go.
Thank you.
Yes, it's school benchmarking.
Do you mind if I drive?
Yeah, let me bring you up here.
Okay.
Those are
Let me
disheartening
figure out what I'm
figures,
doing.
They are.
because the 5% budget increase is fairly modest.
Right.
So just so everybody knows, I'm gonna take minutes based on the video, so I'm not taking minutes now. I wrote down like what
Sure.
time we convened, but I'll do the minutes off the video.
Sure.
It's hard to,
There, sustainability. Yes,
There you go.
You are school benchmarking?
Yep.
Very, oops. Oh, you did separate ones? Do you
Yeah,
have
it's
a
just-
I also
compilation?
suggest at the end of the meeting, we recap action items, because it seems like after we left the last meeting, there's still some lack of confusion, a lot of emails going around about
Yeah.
what our accountabilities were for the next meeting. So
Sure.
if we could just re-summarize action
Sure.
items for everyone, that would be helpful, I think.
okay. So these are the numbers that we pulled out of, well, this is super big.
No, that's good.
Is it good?
Yeah, that's good. That's actually, yeah, perfect.
Okay, so, we had a list of schools, and the data points we pulled out of the Newton executive summary. The ones at the top I added based on a conversation I had with Tracy Novick, who again is our liaison to the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. These are interesting metrics because they help you understand, based on your foundation budget, based on the wealth of your town and the number of students, it's all kind of factored into those numbers. And these are, as it says, FY20, FY20, and then FY19, because that's what we had access to.
So when you say
data comes-
foundation, could you
Sure.
give us the definition for that?
Sure, the foundation budget is what we get from the state.
Okay.
I believe that is true. What this represents, and I don't have my notes, the amount of combined effort yield is a metric that I do not have the formula for. However, the important thing is the percent of foundation. So this is what we're doing as it pertains, what we're contributing as it pertains to the foundation, if that makes sense. The communities on the list at the top probably look a little unfamiliar because these are not the communities we discussed. Part of the reason is that 3 of the communities are regional school districts. And that's very difficult to compare, simply because Northborough, for example, is K through 8, and then they share a high school with Southborough. 2 of the other towns are almost fully integrated with other towns. So you can't break those numbers out, and it's not really fair to compare how much they contribute to the school system. And I'd like to thank the school side team for bearing with me on that and adapting, because I literally had a meeting about it yesterday to try to figure out, well, how do we compute that? And he's like, you just don't try to compare with those combination districts. It's too difficult. But what Dan did put me onto, Dan Gale is our finance guy in the school department, was this idea of above below required net school spending. So the state tells us what we have to spend on schools. If you fall below that amount, there are penalties that you incur. I believe the first stage is a fine, and you have to reach that level. And then if you continue to fall behind, you get fined progressively worse, which is very bad because, of course, if you can't afford to be funding your school district to the required level, then how can you afford to pay the fines? What's interesting is that we're funding 114 above what the state says we should be. Which
That's
you-
based on total budget.
yeah, and you might think, well, why are we so far above? Well, it's because the state underestimates how much these things cost. They're not using complete pictures, real numbers, whatever. But you look at a community like Amesbury and Agawam are both funding at 132% above. Westboro is not on this list. They funded 150% of what the state thinks it should cost. And they can afford to do that. So if you go over, most of the communities that we're looking at here are in about the same range. Wilmington is 142%. That's the highest that we saw.
So does that mean we're 14% over what they're saying we should be funding it? Is that
Basically, yeah.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty small amount. So we picked these communities based on a couple of different, here's a little block. So yesterday when I met with Dan, he was able to give me a list that fall within 5% of our combined effort yield, that have below 4,000 students. So you don't want to be comparing yourself with huge districts, because that's not fair. And are only K-12 municipal together, not Northborough. There are more communities on this list. However, if you look at some of them, we threw out, well, I don't think we threw any out. I think I put Bellingham in because I saw it in the town report.
Yeah.
Which is what I swapped for Northborough, because Northborough, we can't really compare on the school side. So Bellingham got swapped for Northborough. Bellingham, Holliston was one that I saw in the report, but it's not listed here, but it is part of that group. Norton makes that original list too. That was one that was on our original list, as were Amesbury and Agawam. So communities of a similar size with a similar student population. Whoops. So some of the things we look at to see, well, how similar are the populations? We look at what percentage of the town population are students. So to get this number, we take the official town population and we add the enrollment, because you don't count kids. So you add the enrollment. And the percentage is about, they run the gamut a little bit, but we're right in the, we're kind of at the high end on that one. And it won't let me go over now. Why not? And that one did not compute because we don't have those numbers. So you can see where the holes are. We looked at SPED enrollment. So students who are on IEPs and have 504s and are in the special education program. This does not account for students who are below kindergarten and receiving early intervention. It does not include any sort of evaluation programs or any of that stuff. So our special education enrollment is 147. And we have a very low percentage of ELL students. You can see 1.48% in other communities. Some of them are higher. So the percentage of students for whom English is not their first language and they receive services to account for that. When you look at the Student Opportunity Act, one of the ways towns get more money is a higher percentage of ELL students.
Does everybody know what the Student Opportunity Act is?
You guys know, you've seen that in the news?
Yeah, so this is the legislation that's come out lately for the states to adjust the formula by which it allocates aid to different communities. So for those of you who don't follow this stuff quite as closely, the real question on the state level is how much money do we give to localities for education, and how do we divide that up? And how do we make sure that the state isn't paying the bulk of the educational expenses when there's a community that's sitting back just saying, okay, well, we're just never going to raise our taxes. We're going to take a lot of money for the state. And so they have this really crazy way that they go about figuring that out. It's called the foundation budget. And over the years, what we've discovered, or what a lot of communities in the state have discovered, is the state wasn't adequately compensating municipalities for certain fixed costs, like English as a second language students, and a lot of special education students, and the transportation that the state requires that we pay for. So there are all these services that the state requires that we pay for that it wasn't throwing in money for. So it has gone back to say, okay, we're going to pass this Student Opportunity Act, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
And
Had
adjust
other names, but yeah.
adjust the formula. Unfortunately for us, as we learned again this week, we're not getting any more money out of the formula. In fact, we are one of the communities that, out of all of the communities in Massachusetts, who will receive the least benefit from the state rejiggering their formula, and that is the Student Opportunity Act.
We have always been, well, at least, I shouldn't say always, but since I can remember, we've been classified as a minimally funded district. We just receive less aid than other towns. Other communities are going to benefit a lot from this act, and it's not a done deal. I know Representative Moradine is putting in an amendment to try to up the per student contribution, which I believe is currently at 30 per pupil.
I think it's at 20, and I think they want it to go to 30.
They want it to, oh, that's
Yeah,
not great.
so it's an
I was
extra
kinda hoping it'd go to
$30,000 for us.
50.
Yeah. So you pay
I
for
know
half a
Senator
teacher.
Moore put in an amendment to get it to 100, and that was, no.
Right.
We will get some benefit, but it's not going to be enough given the gap.
Okay.
And if anybody wants to talk to me about that after, I can definitely show you some data on that as I understand it.
My only
Are we
two
gonna end
cents
up
on
with less? Sorry, are we gonna end up with less than we're getting now?
We won't end up with less than we're getting. We're just going to have to shoulder a little bit more of the burden going forward and picking up the difference between what we need and what we have.
Yeah, my understanding is it's gonna be
So
a
on a
couple of years before
dollar
we
dollar
see it.
value, we'll get more every year. But, you know, so when the state senators and state representatives come into town meeting and they say, good news, we have an extra $190,000 for you guys this year, and everybody claps, that number's in a vacuum, because, yeah, it's more money than it was last year, but it's way, way less than the amount of, we're gonna potentially increase people's taxes, for instance. Even without an override, like, you know, people's taxes go up every year. So it's a really small number.
That,
Yeah, I mean,
Just,
all of
just, a-
that kerfuffle around $20 or $30 is a joke.
oh, it's a complete joke.
yeah,
At most, $90,000 in a $36 million budget.
Right.
And they run around in circles and get all excited. Okay, I'll give you $31. Get out of here. Just do the right
how
thing.
about you just
and
fund it?
fund
Right.
it.
Let's do that.
So, that's my 2 cents.
So just to take people through who weren't working on it, because I kind of forgot for a minute that not everybody was working on this. So SPED in is students who are participating in special education programs in district, and we do a very good job of keeping students here and helping them here. But there are always going to be students who need to go out of district for special services that we simply can't provide.
Okay, and for those who don't know, why is that important?
Because the students that go out of district, we have to pay their transportation costs.
Right.
And that is a huge, huge cost driver. We'll see some additional funds for that in FY '22. But it's a reimbursement system. So we spend the money this year, we get some money back next year. We don't get it all back. They're working toward 100% reimbursement, but we won't see that until fiscal year '27. So by fiscal year '27, we will get back the X dollars that we spent in fiscal year '26 to transport these kids out of district.
Is that the so-called circuit breaker?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do they do any research on the outcomes and feasibility of the SPED program?
I'm not sure how to answer that.
Well, the answer is probably a big yes.
I mean, every
Because they get
student's
very
evaluated, I'm not sure.
fine-grained in their performance and in their individual development plans.
Well, and one of the big points
It's
too is,
hard for that.
you know, we're mandated by law to provide the services that we provide. And I think the question becomes, are we doing it? Eventually, the question is going to become, are we doing it as efficiently as possible? You know, I tell this story anecdotally, and I don't mean anything more by it than just an example. But when I was running for selectman, I got input from, you get input from a lot of different people, whether you solicit it or not. And I got input from a lot of special education aides who felt like the system could be run more efficiently. I got a lot of input from a lot of special education parents who felt like, well, you know, I have a kid in the system and I know for a fact there's waste. And then you get a lot of input from people who actually, you know, work in the system and in the administration who are like, we're absolutely doing the best that we can do. You know, over the course of, I hope the next few months, we can start to answer those questions a little bit. But, you know, again, I say it again, there is no more touchy subject in all of local politics than the services that we provide to these kids who desperately need them. But, you know, just all we could do is recognize it's a cost driver, and it's one that will swing a budget one way or another on any given year, depending on enrollment. So it looks like, based on these numbers, we're not incredible outliers in terms of special education in district and special education out of district
No.
compared to our sister communities.
No, we're not. And we do, and, you know, I think it's worth noting that we do have families that take advantage of the school choice that we offer. And just so you're aware, school choice brings in about $500,000 every year for our district. So those are students that come in from outside the district. We do take on some special education students from out of district because our programs for things like autism are so good. We have parents calling and saying, I want my son or daughter to go to Grafton because I've heard that you guys have a great program. And we do. We have fantastic staff. They do a really great job. But you'll talk to some parents that don't think they do a good job with some other disabilities and special needs. And so it, you know, it all kind of, it's that third rail, right? You don't want to get too deep in it because there's always a story.
But on the other, we don't have anything here for the other end of the spectrum, for the kids who are gifted, academically gifted.
Oh, boy,
No,
that's
we
a
do not.
loaded topic.
Nope. We'll get to ours shortly when we get to that end of the project.
Well, I just wanted to say about kindergarten, this is one of the metrics that was in the Newton report, and I thought it was really odd until I realized when it was.
Yes.
It-
Yes.
the report was done at a time when the majority of the districts in Massachusetts did not offer full-day kindergarten.
Right.
Some districts were charging for it and still offering the half-day model. Grafton transitioned to a full-day model a few years back.
Right.
We do not charge for it. We do not offer a half-day option. We simply don't have room in the buildings. We don't have the staff. It's all or nothing for us.
Are there
And we do
communities
not
that
charge a fee. And I was amazed. What?
are there communities that do charge a fee?
Yes, amazingly enough.
Wasn't Northborough one of them?
Which one was it? It's one that's not on the list now.
Northborough.
Northborough does charge.
There's a lot of communities that still do lottery for full-day kindergarten, with half-day being the standard.
Yeah, I was surprised. I guess I hadn't really paid attention to it after we went to full day. But we grappled with those issues several years ago before I was on the school committee. And then Holliston, I have it in yellow because I don't think that's right. But the data that I have is that they have 8 kids in full day kindergarten and 165 in half day, which
They're
makes
really
no sense.
enthusiastic.
So I don't know. Those 8 kids were willing to pay, I guess.
Those 8 kids
And
are
Amesbury-
probably the
That's
teacher's
possible.
kids.
I think that,
actually.
new for 2020, I think it got moved, it should be under Agawam, I think.
Oh, okay. All right.
I could double check my notes, but I think
All right,
that
I'll
was an
slide that
Agawam
over.
figure.
So I found that interesting, that they just went to that.
And actually cited their budget, their school budget went up for fiscal year 2020 by, I think, 3 or 4%. And they highlighted full-day kindergarten as being a driver of that.
Okay.
And at the time that we did it, the state was offering a program, and I don't know if they're still offering it, but we got a reimbursement grant after it's again, you do the work, and then the state gives you your cookie. So we implemented full-day kindergarten, and we got the money back to support it, which then raised our budget the following year. Some other things that were in there, just comparing the total school 2020 to the total town 2020. We're still missing a couple things. Holliston, we're really having trouble finding the 2020 budget. So if anybody's got a lead on that, let us know. And
Yes.
then the school budget for Bellingham, that number is old. It's not 2020, it's 2019.
2018.
So you can, oh, sorry, yes.
A small
So you can
point,
see,
Amy,
yeah,
small point. When we say percent of town budget, we are aware that the school benefits are carried by the municipal side of the budget.
that was something I was gonna ask
Debt
about.
service is
That
carried
was something
by
I was
the
gonna ask
municipal
about. I
side.
wasn't sure
Yeah.
how
So
other towns report that.
I'm not sure about that either. And just as a side question, how difficult did you guys find it to get this data to begin with? Because I'm not sure it's going to be readily available to us to get
Did
that.
math.
Yeah, I mean, right.
So like Amesbury had listed in their school budget, like teacher benefits and things like that. And I
Okay.
don't know how it factored in, but like in Agawam's, I didn't see it in there.
Right.
So I don't know, but I didn't go through and add in every number. Did it all add up, or were there things that weren't outright
Well,
listed?
just looking at these budgets, I can't imagine that that's true. You know, again, these are towns that we're comparable to on a number of different metrics, and their total spends are very, very close to ours. So you know, if you were to add benefits into that, it would skew the number enormously.
Benefits and debt service.
In debt service, right?
It's
Yeah,
about
so
$6 million.
I took just the general fund total for the budget total, not, then there was stuff after that with like other.
Right. One indicator that we say a lot, you'll hear it a lot during the budgeting process, is how much we spend per student. You'll notice that we're the lowest on this list. We're still ninth from the bottom in the state. And as Jay likes to say, we get the biggest return on investment. We spend less money per student and we still get really great results. Well, I shouldn't say really great. I'll say we get really good results because we can always improve, we can always do better.
So let's talk about that number for a minute because it bends my mind. We're spending ninth from the bottom of the state in per pupil spending, but our average teacher salary is competitive with these other communities. Our total spend on teacher salary is more than Agawam, Amesbury, Norton. That's kind of amazing.
I think the issue is that we're not competitive for our geographic area. When you look at that number, I mean, we've got Hopkinton, Shrewsbury, and Westboro, who all have a higher average teacher salary than we do. So when teachers leave here, they don't have to move very far to get a better
Right.
salary.
But what's driving our total spend on teacher salary? Sorry, it looks like our average is about the same. Do we have a lot more teachers? Because our student-teacher ratio is comparable. So what do you think is driving our total spend on teachers?
What we haven't looked at benefits at all.
Yep.
Dan Gale made an interesting comment to me yesterday about health insurance costs and looking to see if our teachers are taking our health insurance or not.
Oh, good point.
Are they using ours? Because a lot of these, you can go and look at the health insurance numbers. It's buried in a chart somewhere. He was showing it to me. You can go and look and see how much these districts are spending on healthcare coverage for their employees, for their teachers. And their expense was way higher than what we were looking at. And I couldn't figure out why that is. And Dan said, well, maybe they're spending more per teacher on insurance. So we have a nice low-cost package because we lumped in with municipal, which a lot of communities apparently haven't done
That's an
yet.
interesting thought. I hadn't thought about that.
I don't know.
So that could be, okay.
But I will say, Dan explained to me that, do you guys know about steps and lanes with teacher salaries? Okay, I'm gonna get this wrong and I apologize to everybody in the school committee. Teacher salaries have three components. There's COLA, which is the cost of living. There are steps and there are lanes, and I don't know which one's which, but one is years of experience,
That's
and
a step.
one, is it step?
Yeah.
Thank you. And then the lane is your education level,
Right.
right? So a teacher with a master's degree with 15 years of experience, there's a chart, and it will tell you exactly how much money you will make. And we negotiate that every 3 years. So in Grafton, our reputation, and again, I haven't looked at the data, our reputation is we pay better on the older side. So when you've been here a long time and you have, high education, you've maxed out your degree and your professional development credits, you're going to make a nice salary. On the lower end, the entry level, we're not paying as much as some of the communities in the area. They have theirs flipped around.
Which we actually addressed that in part in the last go-around with the teacher negotiations by sort of eliminating the first step and bringing entry-level people into step two. Obviously with that setup, we're incentivizing things, right? So if we say we're going to pay you more if you've been here longer, what we're really saying is stay. We want to retain our good talent and keep them here. And with the lanes, what we're saying is not only stay, but go back and get a degree and ostensibly become a better teacher by, gaining more knowledge and more experience. So we have a set of goals that we've turned into a compensation framework, and that's our steps and lanes. And, again, when we get to the further part of the project about examining what our values are, a key question is, does that make sense? And you could argue certainly does, but, at what cost?
The interesting thing about that is, we say stay, we want you to stay, but just last year we offered early retirement,
Right,
try to make the budget work.
right,
I assume that was why it was done.
right.
We did have some faculty take advantage of that, which
Right.
was great because it helped us kind of shore up that difference. I have not heard about any plans to offer that again. But the more teachers you lose that are experienced, the more newer teachers you have to hire. And newer teachers are great because they're bringing in some of the latest and greatest pedagogical techniques, but they're not as seasoned and they're not able to mentor younger teachers. So
But isn't that a law of diminishing returns? Because at some point, you're going to max out the number of people who are going to take the early retirement. And those that do, you're then not cutting
Right.
fat, you're cutting into muscle mass.
it's certainly not a sustainable way to make ends
Yeah.
meet. So a deeper look at the special education program, we looked at the percentage of the students in the district in the program, and you can see these are all about the same. We put in the special education budget as a percentage of the school budget, and ours is a little bit higher. Not so much higher than Norton's there, but what I did to get that number, you can't just look at our school budget and see the line that says 9,000. I made this mistake. There's a pie chart in the school budget, and it says line 9,000 special education, and it's like $1 million. And I said, well, that can't be right. So this morning, very early, I emailed Dan Gale and I said, this can't be right. What is it really? And he said, every line in the budget, and you can go online, you can read the school budget line by line. It's all there. Every line that ends in the number 90 is a special education line. and they're divvied up between the teachers, the supplies, all of that stuff. So I went through and I added all of those lines up. I don't know if our number is higher because I did that. It certainly wasn't high enough just taking line 9,000. And keep in mind that the way we structure the school budget is mandated by the state. It's not willy-nilly. All those numbers mean something, and all schools do it the same way, or they should. So I'm not sure if, I gotta dig into it a little bit more. Is Agawam only reporting 9,000, or are they reporting all of those lines added together? I don't know the
That's
answer to that
interesting.
yet.
I wonder if that 13 for us has some teacher salary in it that's included in the 17. Because for Norton, they had it actually broken out, like they had a special ed budget, and I noticed that there was like maybe $100,000 worth of teacher salary in there, and the rest of it was everything else. So like the teacher in like a traditional sense, the way that it would be listed, aren't part of the special ed program. They're all like specialists.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Whereas the
So-
lines that I added were all of the specialists, all of the supplies, there were a bunch of different
Right.
sections that I added together.
But I wonder if there were also teacher salary part of, like, that was also coded 9,
So
that was part of it.
the word teacher, I think to us means a very specific thing. But in the budget sense, a teacher is anybody who works with a student. So we talk about aides and specialists and things like that. They are all considered teachers. So yes, I pulled anybody that had the 9-0 code out of the teacher lines, and I added them in here. So they are double counted because they're also a faculty expense.
Okay, so I'm just saying, we're not comparing apples and apples.
Yeah,
then,
probably not.
Because Norton didn't do it that way. They had it separate.
We might have to dig a little deeper
Okay.
on that one.
Maybe for Amesbury too, that seems like a low number.
Yeah. And again, I just plugged that in today and I noticed it was large and I thought, well, geez, why is ours so much larger? I suspect it's more, they're reporting that 9,000. Or it's not that they're doing it wrong, it's that that's the way
They
the
do it.
websites are reporting and DSE is reporting it that way.
Right,
But it's not 100% accurate.
okay.
Then we started looking at outcomes. Some of these, I'm going to get to the MCAS stuff in a minute. Graduates attending higher education, these numbers kind of go all over the board. We're at 87.4%. Amesbury is 93.4, so there's a pretty big difference there. Bellingham is 74.3. That's interesting. Of course, they're very close to Blackstone Valley Tech. I think they have students that go there. So they may take a bunch of those kids. I'll rant on that later. Average class size is a number that was used in the Newton report, but people aren't reporting it now. And I think it's because we have, 8 years later, or how many years later it is, we have a lot of co-teaching situations.
Right.
Where we might have, I'll throw a number out there, please don't quote this because it's not real, but, let's say we have 28 kids in a first grade class. We might have a co-teacher in that class. So now that's two kids per class. It's really hard, or two teachers per class. It's really hard to report that data.
Right. Make it
And we have
meaningful.
teachers that swing between rooms and there's aides and it's really hard to figure that out as a district-wide figure, which is what that figure is intended to be.
Sure.
However, the student-teacher ratio at the high school level is very available. And that tells you a snapshot of what you really need to know.
So let's kill that line. Let's not.
Yeah, that's why I
focus
have
on
it in
data.
yellow, that we'll probably
Sure.
take it out, but I didn't want to make it disappear and have people say, where did that line go?
The hell, Amy?
So as you can see, our class size is quite nice. Wilmington's down to 11.6, which is enviable.
So what is our class size? Because it's not on this.
So we don't have the number.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
That's why we're
Yeah,
not.
they stick with student-teacher ratio.
So 13 and a half students to a teacher across all high school classes. So those can be, senior seminars, and they can be, freshman English. So there's a good mix in there. Our graduation rate is 96.8%, which I think is outstanding. Other districts are not quite as lucky there.
So look at Amesbury. Amesbury
know.
is sending a bunch of people to college, but not all everybody's graduating. It's all or nothing.
That's
Yeah.
not making
The
any sense.
homeschool.
But of the kids that do graduate, a lot of them go. So it's interesting. MCAS scores. Everybody really likes concrete data. How we're doing. The way that the Newton report classified this data, they were using a measurement called CPPI, which is a number that DESE calculates. It has to do with all of these things that I don't understand. And it's a number that ranges from 0 to 100. We don't use it on the English and math anymore. We're using a student growth percentile, and I love this number because this is more meaningful. This tells us how much did the students improve from grade 9 to grade 10. Are they getting better? Are they getting worse? What's happening? And we're growing. We're getting better. Our number was very high this year, which is great. DESE says that improvement is between 40 to 60% on that, or 40 to 60 on that score, and we're right in that sweet spot. So that's great. They're still using the older figure on the science test because I think that test is newer. And in Grafton, it's interesting to note that the students take this test in grade 9. It is a biology test, and biology is taken in 9th grade here. So our kids do take it in grade 9, even though it's a grade 10 test. So you compare apples to apples, you don't compare them between the rows. And I'll say on record that I don't necessarily believe that MCAS scores are a great indicator of the health of a district. I think you need to have some number to make numbers people comfortable. But I look at test scores, you know, I know some very smart students that they just don't do well on these kinds of tests. They're not going to win the Abigail Adams scholarship and get free in-state tuition, but, you know, they might be number 1 in their class. It's not necessarily a correlation that you can draw. However, we're doing well. And if you want more, if you're curious about this SGP number and the other grade levels, Tracy Callow, our assistant superintendent, did a great presentation at Tuesday's school committee about it. And I was really excited because I do not like talking about MCAS, but I really liked what she had to say. And she did identify, I think it was grades 4 and 5 math, we had a little bit of a dip. And we need to reverse that. And she told us everything that they're doing right now to make that go away, to fix it and reverse it, So that's what the school side has so far. We have some other towns we can look into if we want. I do want to investigate further that special education budget information and finish out this chart. Does anybody have questions, comments? And I do want to give credit where it's due. Everybody helped, so please and thank you. You guys did a great job.
Thank you.
On very short notice, because I kept moving the finish line. I was like, no, don't do this one. And somebody wrote back and said, but I'm already doing that one. I said, yeah, but we don't need it anymore. We can't compare Northborough because they're regional. But everybody helped out, and it was really great. So we'll keep it up. Finish this out.
Yeah, Amy,
Yeah.
the last couple of years with certain committees, there has been a refrain about how much money Grafton puts into their schools. We put in more money than any other town around. Okay. As a data-oriented person in a data-oriented group, it would be handy to really have that number nailed. So that would mean factoring back in the benefits and the debt service and balancing things out. I remember looking at some spreadsheet that DESE put out. Or I think it was a combination of DOR and DESE. And they said almost every town is 50%. 50% goes to schools, 50% is municipal. I'm not sure that's valid. I don't know what the formula was. But that number, I know, runs all sorts of flags up the pole and people start throwing things at it and
The
raising it.
only town that I know that isn't like that is Boston, because Boston spends so much money on infrastructure and so much money on public safety, which isn't to say they don't spend so much money on schools, but
Yeah.
it's a lot of money. No matter what.
50,000 kids. in
But
the schools.
they're an outlier. I mean, that's just a completely different animal than us. But you're right. It's more or less around there, between 50 and 60%.
Yeah, having a concise, calm response to that issue, I think is helpful for everybody.
So you don't think having lines 20 and 21 and 22 is good enough? As long as we're comparing apples to apples, which I believe we are.
If we really are, but I know, I guarantee I can name 3 people who are going to jump up and say, debt service, benefits, you didn't factor that in, and we pay more.
Oh, yeah, I
It's
know those
just-
3 people. Okay, so.
Well, you're getting really, so I'll be completely frank, you're getting way beyond my understanding, so I may need some help with that.
Okay, I
But-
can, go ahead.
I was just thinking, I think you've got to put an asterisk there or draw the line in the sand somewhere, because you are never going to have a situation where you can do 100% apples to apples comparison.
I agree.
There are going to be variables on this, and there are going to be spikes within our own budgets.
And if I call Holliston tomorrow and say, I need da-da-da-da-da, they don't even have the budget on their website, like, they're not, you know what I mean, like, they're not gonna be motivated to calculate that for me, and I think that's why the towns, we have the self-reporting
Right.
to the DESE, and I think that at some point, we have to be satisfied with that. I'm
I think
willing to
we'll-
dig into it, but
The other thing about the in particular, the benefits, because really we're talking about health insurance, we're probably gonna get into that on the municipal side as well.
Oh, yes.
Because, I suspect that a lot of the communities that we're gonna compare ourselves to are the municipal side's gonna be carrying the health insurance costs
Really?
for the school side, and we're gonna be looking, one of the key questions for the municipal side is going to be, are we doing as well as we can on health insurance? And we'll be looking at not only total spend, but percentage of budget and percentage increase on an annual basis to see, what we could be doing differently, if anything. But then, even that, I mean, you're gonna get the same objection, and the objection's going to be, yeah, but we're not Agawam, Amesbury, Norton, Holliston, we're Grafton, and we're geographically situated where we are. And we either could go to the GSC last year, or we put it out to bid and we got, what do we get, Harvard Pilgrim? And that was it. Like, that was our choice.
oh, really?
So that's gonna be their objection to, this whole exercise. That having been said, I think what I would like to see is those other communities anecdotally that people compare us to, just so people know. Like, if you're wondering what, because I think you're right. I think, we're not in the same market for a teacher as Amesbury, because Amesbury is further away.
Yep.
But when teachers say that, well, I could get more money down the road they're talking about is Old Westboro Road or Millbury Street,
So what other communities?
So,
Melbury, Sutton,
yeah, I would say Millbury, Sutton, Westboro.
What, are you ready to cry? Because I've seen that.
Yeah, I know. Mendon Upton's regional, so probably not.
Yeah, no,
Okay. I think those 3.
okay.
And, again, all that data is gonna come with a big asterisk from us,
Yeah.
which is, we're gonna refer right back to, foundation budget, combined effort yield, the demographics, the whole 9 yards. What do you think about the value of adding a data point for per capita income in the community, or household income?
Well, we've got that on the municipal
house
side, it's not
value.
that hard to find.
Okay. Okay. So that'll be present in the benchmarking
In
report anyway.
fact, we have different towns on municipal than we have for school.
'Cause it just,
And I believe it really should be the same towns.
not only for this purpose, but it would be interesting to see the relationship between per capita income and achievement. Who
Oh.
can afford tutors, for instance? Who can afford childcare? Who can afford to send their kids to full-day kindergarten in Northborough with the fee? Is it Northborough or Northbridge? Northborough?
we didn't do Northbridge.
Oh. What was the fee that they charged?
For
'Cause-
kindergarten?
Yeah, after seeing the projections, I'm a big fan of income right now. I'm just wondering what the fee was.
Well, you should attend the school committee meeting in 2 weeks.
Yes. I'm not gonna say anything.
No one ever does.
No.
We sit there, we're like, anybody from the audience? And they all sit there.
Nope.
Please come talk. All right, we can add that. I think it is really, really difficult, and when people bring up, why didn't you compare Northborough? That's
Right.
going to be one. And we can throw Shrewsbury in too. if you really, really want
Let's
to.
throw Shrewsbury in.
Northborough, it just gets too difficult.
I
Choose-
did break it out, by the way.
You did a great job, but there's so much, like, my head was spinning when Dan and Tracy were both trying to explain to me, whoa, where did this come from? Oh,
I think I made those notes.
oh, okay. Okay, well, you're gonna have to get those out of there.
Just a
Delete.
That's fine.
You can whack it right
Um,
now. It's gone.
Yeah, we'll throw those in more to compare with the municipal side, but I think it's important to say, there's, 300 school districts in Massachusetts.
Right.
And, we really narrowed it down to the ones that are the most similar in terms of enrollments and, economics, how much we're contributing. There really aren't too many districts that are contributing that much below 50%
Okay.
from their town budget to their schools. And if I may say, that is our primary obligation. It's the only thing that we do as a town that is a right that's in the state constitution. Every child has a right to a free and public education. So that's why we have a minimum spend. We don't have a minimum spend on other things, but we have a minimum spend on that.
Was there data available in the towns that we looked at for total number of full-time equivalents?
What does that mean?
That's the
Teachers,
enrollment.
basically, so it's how you, it's how
Oh,
you
yeah, the
measure.
teachers,
It's
yeah.
how you measure a teacher.
Yeah.
And the reason I asked that question is because we consistently get this thing, and I've heard it again twice this week, and it drives me crazy. We've got 24 departments in the town, and all the money goes to this one department. But like,
Okay,
10 departments have like one person, so it's like,
all right, I'm just gonna throw it in here so I don't forget.
it's,
Well,
Yeah,
we have to govern the whole town. Well, I know, but yeah,
I couldn't find FTEs on anything that I looked at.
okay.
I can get it, don't worry.
You know where I think has, I think the Department of Education might have it.
Amy Marr has it.
Oh, EMR has it, okay.
That might be another one though where you really need to look at, are they including everyone?
Right.
And what
Because
is,
I
and
saw
what
some
is,
breakdown
what
of,
is a teacher,
I saw a
right?
breakdown of teachers.
Right.
But does that include other support staff that's
Right.
part of the
Right.
school department? and things
Right.
like
Yep,
that?
and, in our district, the BLAs and the IAs are contracted. They are contracted, they're separate from the teacher contract, but they're contracted. Other districts don't do it that way. It's the wild, wild west out there. We treat them like teachers, and we classify them as teachers.
Right.
So honestly, you guys, all things being equal though, awesome job in the past 2 weeks collecting all this data because, I sort of sent you out with a vague mandate and a memo and you came back with this, so thank you. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Barry, what do we have on the municipal side?
Not that it's a competition. But go us.
yours was 1.5 pages?
It's not about, okay, it's not how much data you have, it's how meaningful it is. Because if I just look at it and my eyes glaze over, that doesn't help.
There we go. I should have done it on the other side. Jeez, what am I doing?
Yeah, I saw all the stuff you were flooding into the Google Docs thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Here we go.
Thank you.
I relabeled my folder when you started doing that, 'cause I'm like, wait, where's the folder?
Yeah, I was just,
I'm not-
all of that.
I'm a
you.
little rocky on Google
Confused.
Docs.
That's okay.
renaming. I didn't want to mess. You know? Okay, so, what do we have? Minutes,
This is great.
no, municipal comparisons, is that it?
My pen.
What did I call it?
Municipal comparisons, Barry, that's the one.
Yeah,
that
that's
looks
the one.
Exactly like this one.
Okay. Oh, look at that.
Barry, you can explain the levy to us?
Yeah, I'll try.
Because that's one I always, I
That's
hear that,
weird.
I hear that
Oh, I know.
word.
I'm not gonna use it.
Led Zeppelin.
Foundation budget and levy. It's,
Sustainability
talking about.
One I understand and one I don't.
Levy sounds so 1700s,
All I can
doesn't
think
it?
of is drove my Chevy to
The
the levee
levee.
and the levee was dry. Yeah, that's right.
Our
'cause
levee's
it's-
dry.
Not using
about
Peter Sam
music.
anymore? Municipal's not using Peter Sam anymore? I was,
No,
I thought that
that's
was
on the
another
school
just,
side?
regional.
that you had that on there.
Oh, Petersham is regional, so we kicked it.
It's like 100 people.
Yeah, well, that was another reason. It
Okay,
was-
municipal
It was the CUI that
comparisons.
looked good.
I was editing this up a little bit before. Barry and TBD gathered most of this data, so it's a work in progress. I took, Ed, I took your data points, and then I started to look at some others, like the budget, and the budget has a certain structure to it. And I thought, we might as well put some of those data points in here because they make sense, and then I had data from other places. Anyway. Before we even go any further, I think the towns we use for municipal should be the same towns we use for school. Add, subtract, however we want to do it. Because we know people are going to say, well, you're comparing Agawam over here, but you're not comparing Agawam over here. So we can worry about that. Population, the most recent numbers I could find were for 2015. I did, in the Google Docs, Grafton Sustainability Commission folder, I went off and I grabbed the budget books and town report and audit for most of the towns I have here. Ashland, Auburn, Ashland actually even has like a 15-year sustainability document where they say, this looks good, this doesn't look good, blah, blah, blah. But I grabbed those so that for those who sign up to pick up some of these other towns, I can stick your name in there and the information is there. You hope that the information from the budget book overlaps with the information from the Department of Revenue, Division of Local Services. And if you're curious, what's one of the best locations, I put it in the URL.
Okay.
And I learned from a previous exercise to identify where you got the data. Because there are people who are going, I'm not going to go into that. So identify where the
question where you got
comes
the
from.
data. I
I
getcha.
just have flashbacks every once in a while. When I do, just pat me down, pat me on the head.
Well, no, I mean, that's an excellent idea. You should always be able to source it and have attribution.
Yes.
Because otherwise, that's how urban legends, rumors get started and
yes.
snowball.
One of the problems is, as Barry and I found out a while back, is the state sometimes carries slightly different data than the town does for
Yeah. And
income reporting
when
purposes
I sent
especially.
this out, there's a number on here that if you got it right, you get tonight's prize.
Sorry, man, I didn't even look
The
at
one
this
that's
yet.
weird. Okay.
The debt
So-
service carries weird.
It certainly is. There is actually a technical explanation for that, but let's take a look at this. I dug out populations, and that is also from the Department of Revenue DLS Gateway. And the populations are relatively dissimilar for these 7, 8 towns. I think it would be of value, because somebody's gonna start asking this, if we could somehow carve out school age versus seniors, et cetera. Why would you want seniors? Because one of the hot issues, valid issues, is that there are, quote, seniors who have lived in town all their lives and can no longer afford the taxes to stay here.
Yeah, we
I've heard
lost over,
You?
500 residents last
Okay.
year.
So, to try to dig that out somewhere, I'm not sure.
I think the Department of Local Services has that number.
Okay, I can try to find that.
It's in the budget book.
That's true too.
Okay,
It's in the budget book.
Yeah, I mean, we carry that number. I just wonder where we would get Ashland, Auburn, Holliston, Northborough, all
Yeah.
their seniors.
so per capita incomes, we can see are, we are Grafton here, 47. We're right in the middle, really, of these guys. Some of them are tiny, like Oxford and Auburn. I'm surprised at how low their per capita income is.
Can I just ask what year is that?
That was the 2019 numbers.
Okay.
Most of
Thanks
these
for doing my
came
homework.
from
There you go.
oh, Lord,
Well, two.
this guy. And I converted it 2018, I think. I can check. That's all.
Sorry, but not to go off topic, but there it is, Holliston with the higher per capita income and the higher graduation rate and the higher rate. Anyway, sorry, Barry.
Okay. Property values, some fascinating little bits here, but you can see the total assessed value, Ashland 2.8, 2.1 for Auburn. 2.1 for Auburn?
Wow.
I find that, there's a couple of towns in the area that I find fascinating. Why would Auburn have such a small commercial and industrial, especially commercial? because they have several highways, and Auburn has that, that, what do you call it, big mall.
Yeah.
Even though it's gone through some difficult times, it's still assessed, and many buildings next to it, and they have some other commercial stretches. But there it is. Bellingham Grafton is residential 2.3. The big thing we're looking at here is how much commercial and industrial property do you have as part of your assessed value? Grafton and Ashland are tiny, the others are pretty strong. And why does that matter? Because dollar for dollar, the more you have in commercial or industrial, the fewer kids you have going to your schools. And the fewer kids you have going to your schools, the less expensive it is for property taxes and the whole thing.
Well, also the higher percentage of your property that you can start taxing as commercial based instead of your residential based.
Fascinating stuff I found, and not all of these, the print I did a couple hours ago, and then I found some more information to put in here. The tax rate for us is 1666, and that's from the fiscal year 20 budget book. Auburn is 1842 for residential and $23 for commercial and industrial. We charge 16. Of course, the argument is, well, we should charge more. And then everybody with a business leaves town.
Yeah, you have to be attractive to get businesses to come in.
Right.
So if you're charging $20 and you don't have a
Yes.
mall to put people in, no one's gonna come. They're not coming now.
Right.
Yes.
Why?
Just, I'll move back up here. I yanked out the property values and the total assessed values, and I did the percentages of residential plus open space. And open space can be for playgrounds or it can be for farms. So it's chapter 61, chapter 62, things like that. And we do have still some farms. Commercial and industrial is your big one. That's the thing that helps drive costs down in other places. I started to look at our town budget, and the budget book tends to work in this direction. The levy limit from last year, add the 2.5% increase, then the new growth, blah, blah, blah. I can fill all that in, that's not a big deal. Or whoever's going to pick up some of these other towns can fill that in. New growth is the big, interesting, exciting thing. New growth really means more houses, businesses, industry. And what new growth does is it lets you take a percentage and add that above your 2.5 levy limit. Just to give you an idea, I think it still holds, it's about right. You need about $60 million in new development to get $1 million in new growth for this year.
Yes.
And then that 1 million does go into next year. It's not a one-time thing, it keeps going up. But 60 million, I know somebody put that out in a Facebook tweet or a Twitter tweet somewhere, and responses started to come back. That means we need 10 more Stop and Shop plazas? Holy cow. So, I won't tell you who put that out. Anyway, so it's pretty easy to, the reason I did it this way was so that when we get these numbers, we can start comparing especially debt exclusion and any overrides.
So that's right. So that's the important part.
Yeah.
The other stuff can tell us, sort of where they are, where they've been. That's the sort of thing I want to know, where they're going. So for who?
What is this debt percentage of budget 21?
Yeah, can we talk about that number for a minute? Because that jumped right out at me. So, Barry, I assume what you did was calculated on all the percentage of the budget spend that we have. What percentage of that is dedicated to debt?
Yeah. Where is that? I lost it.
Someone needs to figure out
20-something million?
All the way down.
Right,
There it is.
no kidding.
Yeah.
what the hell is going on.
But yeah, I mean, that one is huge compared to everybody else.
Does that include water sewer for us?
No.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
Why?
This is one of those interesting little oddities. It's, where's the number? 13 million?
13 million, yeah.
In 18.
Wish it were 13.
This is when we, very wisely, town administrator worked with the bank that does our bonds, and they said, because rates are coming down, we can renegotiate this debt at a lower interest rate. So your principal plus interest every year will be lower. To do that, the mechanics are, if I've got it right, we pay off everything now, but we bring in these bonds, and the bonds we're using to, and blah, blah, blah.
I see.
So somewhere in the cycle, when it was reported, and I asked the state, I got the guy who wrote the program that you look at when you're doing, his name is Don, when you're, when you're looking at this Department of, Division of Local Services Gateway. He was very adamant. He said, I just put the numbers in that I get from your town. And then he started to go through some other things that we needed to do, blah, blah, blah. But that number is not the number that we actually netted out paying in principal plus interest for that year. Just that the number was reported. It had to be reported correctly, which it was a big number. But that was really like a budget, I don't know if you've ever done the municipal budgeting. It's the same as corporate budgeting, where you do double entries, and in some cases, if the value of whatever you did comes out different, then you have to do a triple entry, and this got caught in the middle of doing those entries. So I can adjust that number, which we should, but our debt service is nowhere near 13.7 million for that
Okay.
year.
Okay.
Where my
Because I didn't think that was
No,
the case.
but our numbers do go up and down, and the budget book is the place to go back into to get that.
I mean, if that were the case, we wouldn't have the bond rating that we have.
Right, absolutely no, we would not.
Right.
What I found also interesting in here was the free cash number, and the DLS gave me the free cash number as of the end of 18, beginning of 19, they do that at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Auburn was gigantic. And I have, that's gotta be an oddity, and there's something wrong there. It can't be that they have 12 million in free cash. If that's the case, they're way over budgeting, way over taxing, way over collecting, very good, but, no, not 12 million.
Okay, that's interesting.
Can I ask, because this is something that I had heard, are we over budgeting?
So,
That was not a planted question, by the way,
no,
I just noticed
but
it.
just to answer that question briefly, here's what we do to pay for capital needs. Instead of zero basing our budget and budgeting very tightly every year, and then creating a separate fund for capital, we budget. And then if at the end of the year there are things left over, that money goes into free cash. From free cash, which is now one-time money, right? That's not part of your operating budget anymore. We spend it on capital needs, which makes a lot of sense for a lot of different financial reasons. I will say that having been on FinCom for a few years and going through the cycle for a few years, there was never a place where it was obvious that we had over budgeted. To me, and just looking at it, the stuff that got turned back every year tended to be, okay, we have to budget, $20,000 for the weights and measures department because they might be needed this year, and it turns out every year they aren't, but you can't starve them. Someone retired. Somebody, we combined a department. We found inefficiency, and now this one job is now 1.5 jobs, and so that freed up $30,000. It was things like that happened year after year after year, where there was never a pattern for what I thought. I didn't think so for what really came back as free cash. So it's been suggested that if we were to zero base our budgets, we might find more efficiencies. We could budget tighter, but then on the flip side of that, you get the complaint that Craig Doffney had last year about the schools, when he would say, "Well, the schools used to turn back all this money." Well, that was because they were really over budgeting. Right, and at the end of the year,
Yeah.
The old superintendent would give back all this money. Now that the school department zero bases its budget, it's a lot leaner, and it doesn't do as many turnbacks. So you could theoretically budget a little bit tighter, I think, on the municipal side. But then that still sort of leaves you a problem with, okay, well, now free cash is going to be lower. And that's important for two reasons. Number one, it's really hard to pay for capital needs with declining free cash because we're already behind on capital. And number two, free cash now lately has been counted into stabilization when we go to apply for our bond rating, we count free cash plus stabilization, and that makes up the 7% of our budget that bonding agencies look at. They want you to have between 5 and 10% of your municipal budget dedicated as stabilization. So if our free cash decreases, then that threatens our bond rating. And I'll tell you right now, we're not going to have $2.1 million in free cash this year. We'll have closer to 1.8, which is getting low. It's getting low. So, you know, I know that, I mean, everything should be on the table, and it will. We'll get to that, but there are no.
It seems like a large number for somebody who's only looked at the school side, because we just created a stabilization account last year and put a little bit of money into it, and this year at October town meeting, there should be a warrant for us to put money into that account.
Right.
What was left over from last year? Anybody know how much was left?
Nothing.
0.
So
We have nothing.
this year we'll have free cash certified to come in. We'll be adding $1 million. So right now our free cash went from like 2.1 million and 3.2 million a couple years before that, down to $800,000 this year, because as the year goes on, you know, things come up that you pay for, more so lately, I'll tell you. And now we've gotten to a point where, yeah, we're going to add $1 million back in. It'll be 1.8, but a year from now, I'll be really curious to see where that number's at, you know?
Probably
So
very
it looks like a big number, but really it's not. As the year goes on, we pay for more and more things.
I think if you look across too, I mean, if you remove the upper outlier of Auburn and the lower outlier of Uxbridge, we're on par with these other communities, you know,
Yeah.
give or take, plus or minus 500,000.
Yeah, Uxbridge real low. Wow, that's not good.
Yeah, but what's the population of Uxbridge compared to Grafton?
Ah, we can look that up. That is,
I mean, you
thank you,
know,
Barry. 13,892.
So 5,000
yeah,
5,000 fewer.
Yeah.
yeah. Are we going, Barry, are we gonna look at, or do you want us to look at it all, for the next meeting? Trying to figure in anything about the planned layoffs, because I don't know, again, how accurate any of the rumors I've heard are.
No, let's not do that.
Okay.
We'll keep this without looking forward to FY '21. But with that in mind, so I think we have what we want to do for school numbers moving forward. Barry, you want to divide up assignments for municipalities now?
Yeah.
Let's give Mark a lot because he's at the Patriots game.
Oh, yeah.
Good idea.
I knew there
Yeah,
was something
that's what you
good.
get when you miss a meeting.
Well, let me just point out, I got into this, this burr, if you will, that in our budget book, there is a very, very handy page that lists all of the spending. It gets to bloody detail on salaries, expenses, and all that stuff. And then there's a summation of that. That matches with what we have here for, that the DLS has put out.
Okay.
My concern is with the education number that they reported, it does not always look the same as what we have.
Okay.
So I'm a little,
So the question is, what number do you want to report?
yeah.
I think
So-
that's why years matters
In
too.
addition,
Yeah.
when we look at these things, police, fire to some extent, some of the intergovernment and other things, there's revenue that these guys bring in, and I'd like to see if we can somehow, this is where I go into my bit, open it up and identify, police cost this much, but they bring in this much. Building costs this much, but it brings in this much. Recreation actually makes a profit, which is a great idea. It's a small one, but it covers all of its expenses and all of the insurance and pays for all of the people to run their programs. That kind of thing, I think, is where we would like to be, maybe at the third step, where we start saying, are the places we can go to generate more revenue, or perhaps
Yeah,
to cut expenses?
I think that's right. I think we're at the apples to apples comparison stage right now. So I'm less worried about whether or not our education number comes from DLS or the individual towns as much as I want every town to come from the same place. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? When we get to the point where we are examining cost and income, that I think, you know, that's where I want to do a deeper dive into that
Okay.
portion of it. And I guess it depends on, you know, you can do it now or do it later. I just don't want to delay this particular aspect, trying to accomplish every single part of the project right now.
Right.
You know?
By the way, here's the debt service number for Grafton, 3,000,008.
Oh,
If
good.
that-
Yeah,
instead
that
of
makes
the
sense.
24. That was a cute one, but I found it.
That makes sense.
Can I just ask, because we were talking about the community should be the same, and we talked about, on the education side, we're gonna add Millbury, Sutton, Westboro, Shrewsbury. Should we be adding those to the municipal
Yes.
side as well?
Yes, we should.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we should.
So can we decide on a list of communities that we want?
So, I hear what Barry's saying.
Ones?
Millbury, Sutton, Westboro, Shrewsbury.
Oh, sorry, yeah, right.
To make us cry and feel
I can
sad
type.
about how poor we are.
UTTON.
My
Millbury,
only
Sutton-
concern with picking,
Which one's Amy?
Millbury, Sutton,
Shrewsbury.
Westboro, and Shrewsbury.
Ooh, the biggies.
my only concern with picking the same communities to benchmark on the educational side and have them be the same ones that the Department of Revenue identifies for us on the municipal side is,
Sister community.
yeah, I'm just worried there's a reason why the DOE
I
and
asked
the
the
DOR
guy
do it
from the
differently.
state, what is a sister community? What defines it? And he said, what would you like? Really? Because you can compare yourself by population,
Right.
by percentage of open space. I mean, if you're out in Western Mass, you'd like to have percentage of open space as a comparison. You know, road miles would make sense for, I don't know,
So road,
Provincetown?
road miles would make perfect sense on the municipal side, for instance. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that makes as much sense on the school side, but, you know, when you're talking about the entire point of this exercise ultimately is to tell people, you know, what they ought to think about the predicament we find ourselves in, then having a similar set of communities makes more sense to me. But my concern is there's a reason why DOR and DOE had separate sets of communities for schools and for revenue purposes on the municipal side. And I don't want school side people to be like, well, this benchmarking is completely crazy, because why would you compare us to Bellingham and Ashland? Or, well, Bellingham made both lists, that's good.
Yeah, and so did
Yeah.
Holliston.
Yeah.
On the other hand, just to give a different POV, I do think it makes sense to put in Millbury, Sutton, Westboro, and Shrewsbury, even though there may not be apples to apples comparisons. But the first thing that comes to mind for a lot of people in this community, or when you say sister community, they take the greatest common denominator, what's near us?
Right,
Yes.
What's nearby?
Right.
Agreed.
right.
Which would argue for Upton.
Yes, I agree.
But they
Not on
were
the school
regional.
side.
Yeah, I
I
would, yeah.
Well, no, but I'm just saying, just
Yeah.
on the municipal,
It's
even
hard
though
with,
it's,
Okay, what would be handy is if we could, so that leaves us with 8 original and now 4 more, 12.
okay.
Um,
So,
Means I can pick up another one.
In the end, can we keep it separate?
We
And
can.
talk about
We
it
can do it.
separately?
Yeah, we can do whatever we want.
Talk about the schools separately, like these are the schools that are similar to us,
Yep.
and this is what their budget looks like, and then these are the towns that are
And-
similar to us, and that's,
not to
is
make it
that more
too,
useful than?
I think that it is. And I don't mind treating schools like a different animal, because they kind of are. So I think that's fine.
Can I just, one counterpoint to that, we're trying to present to the community, our sustainability for our town, which is a combination of municipal and school.
Right.
And when we start saying, well, these communities do this for school and these other communities do this for municipal, you're not putting one single community together.
Right.
And I worry you could say, well, sure, they spent a lot more on school and they have a higher graduation rate or something like that. But then if we're not comparing to, well, what did they not spend on municipal perhaps
Right.
to balance their budget? So I guess my feeling would be, let's have a group of overlap.
Yeah,
But
I
then there
think,
could be some
I was-
others.
I was
I think we
gonna
do
say-
have the overlap now. I think we didn't have as
Yeah.
much before, and I was a little concerned about that. We only had 2 overlapping.
Yeah.
Now we're gonna have 6 overlapping. And I think
And
that's
you-
gonna help. But what you're gonna see as you go through and you start pulling this data, it's going to look very different from the communities we've done. And I think that's why
Right.
you're gonna see budgets that are twice what we spend for half the students, literally. And so I think that, that might show some people, well, hey, we could be doing much worse. And that's why I talk about our ROI.
Do you want to
'Cause that's a
do,
number people understand.
do we want to add another town of overlap from the municipal list onto the school list? Like pick an Auburn? Because it's geographically close, population's close. Per capita income is, well, I guess that's not close.
Oh, we
It
know
was-
the one
yeah,
that
their-
people want to compare it to,
Their school
Northbridge.
population was quite a bit different, but we can add them.
Northbridge?
Northbridge.
Is that really a good comparator?
Well, we don't have Northbridge on the other side either,
No, we don't.
on your
Nope,
side.
neither one.
Yeah.
Why do you want Northbridge?
I've heard people compare it. We almost have a better football team. Depending on.
North-
I've heard people
Northbridge
say
is,
that.
Northbridge is what our school's gonna be in 5 years if we don't fix this. Not to knock Northbridge, they're doing the best they can, but,
I mean,
they've
Ashland
been
is,
trying to do an override, and I don't think they succeeded yet.
I mean, on the face value of it, top
Ashland
page
might be
data,
good.
Ashland is a good comp, but is it geographically close enough? It's, you know,
Not far.
Yeah.
It's what, 15, 20 miles?
We had Ashland on the list. They were close with either the amount of CEY or the percentage. And I kicked them off because their population was different. I was trying to get well, it was what Dan gave me for the, below 4,000 foundation enrollment.
Oh, I
They
see.
have more, I believe.
Do you want to add them back on just for the hell of it?
I can add them in if you want them on both.
Yeah, let's do both. Let's do that one.
$73
maybe
million
there were issues,
budget, wow.
Okay, so Barry needs some help.
Yeah, so Barry, you want me to take, I could take Shrewsbury and Westboro?
Oh, you good ones.
I'm not gonna put these in the minutes, cause this is getting a little too granular for what I keep track of, so if everybody could track their own. I put action items, but they're broad-based.
Sure, yes. Okay, so Laura's got Shrewsbury, Westboro.
You could just give me one, I don't care, it doesn't, it's all one for me. Doesn't matter.
How about, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna give you Northborough because that's gonna be a really easy assignment. The town manager at Northborough does a really great job, of putting everything online. He's got a really great visual budget. And his name is, John Laguerre. If you have any questions at all, he'll answer them for you.
John Laguerre.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a name in Massachusetts finance, Massachusetts town administrators.
Yeah. He's a sort of he likes to be a teacher of this stuff, so he's helpful.
So Martin, you have Auburn
Auburn.
and Northborough.
Oh, well, okay.
Oh, Auburn's gonna be fun.
Actually, we have what, 12? And we have 4 people? 12 towns, 4 people?
Yeah, so 3 each.
So we should 3. Which one would you like to take?
Doesn't matter, just pick one. Bellingham?
Bellingham.
Right. I could also take Sutton.
Oh, man, that's an easy one.
You keep saying that.
By the way, if you need a contact in Sutton, you have DeFazio
Oh, that's right.
on the select board.
Forgot about that.
Okay, great.
So let's give Mark Ashland, Holliston, Oxford, and Uxbridge because he's absent.
Well, wait a minute. I think we got it.
So for the education side, I'll fill in the top, because I have that awesome spreadsheet, and I have 2 more awesome spreadsheets to show you. I will email them to you. They will not work in Google Docs. I'll send you some information on how to play with them, because you can filter, which is really awesome, and that's how we figured out this very narrow description. 2.5 hours Dan and I spent playing with this one spreadsheet. It was crazy. But I want to get that top piece, the top 4 lines, all from the same spreadsheet. So I'll fill all those in like I did with the others. And then if we can just try to get as much as possible from DESI, we should do that. If we have to rely on self-reporting, we can, but I'd prefer, I think the community would prefer. So we have to finish Holliston, Wilmington, and Bellingham. So who had Holliston, who had Bellingham?
Bellingham.
You have Bellingham? Someone started Holliston, was it me? Might have been me. Might have been me. I might have just seen the thing and said, I'll do it. So I'll finish Holliston. And then if you guys just want to, I mean, we don't have to sign. We got Wilmington, Millbury, Sutton, Westboro, and Shrewsbury.
Who's
I
gonna do
don't know
Ashland?
if we're gonna be able to get that info in Bellingham. I can try to call them, but
And Ashland, excuse me. Yeah, I mean, I'll poke a little bit more.
I looked for 2 hours.
All right. Well, I may have,
Just saying.
it was just the one number, right?
No, I couldn't find their school budget
All right.
anywhere.
All right, don't worry about it.
What town?
Bellingham.
Bellingham.
They have the FY18.
Bellingham.
Oh, stop
No,
it. I'm
good
gonna-
try. I found the minutes from the FinCom meeting, because I did the same thing. It was insane.
Be careful of Siri. I was bending over to clean out one of my cabinets, and I couldn't get to something, I couldn't reach something, and I said, oh, expletive. And Siri all of a sudden piped up and said, that wasn't nice.
All right, so what else we got?
We have minutes.
Oh, yeah, do we have minutes to go over?
Yeah, do you guys just want to split that up over email? We don't have to do it on camera.
Sure.
You guys do whatever you come.
Fine.
Take one at a time, because I think that really worked well.
Yep.
Do one and then say, all right, I'm done with this. Let's move on to the next one. And I'll send you the spreadsheets.
One thing that I was working on based on our inaugural meeting, I'm putting together, and I will add it in over the next few days, a PowerPoint presentation that shows context, and data points. So for example, going back to 2000, 2001, the average that we were paying in a single-family tax bill was down at the 4,000 rate. So our taxes have gone up in the past 19 years, on average, 45 to 49%. However, what I'm also putting in is going back to population from, say, 2000, what schools we had and what we've added in the past 15 to 18 years, like schools, fire department, police, et cetera, and the cost attached to that, as well as anecdotally, like how many new traffic lights, how much in road repairs, et cetera.
The big data point you're gonna need is property value.
Yeah, and I have that too. But I'm putting it in PowerPoint rather than a spreadsheet.
Right.
Although with the graphs depicting it, you can see what's going up, what's going down, what's leveling off. And sometimes, one picture is worth 1,000 words.
Critical.
So
It's needed.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Wait, we need to do minutes.
Oh, we are gonna do minutes.
I
Okay,
hate to
sorry.
be that person,
Okay.
but we're 3 meetings out.
Yep.
Did everybody have a chance to read the minutes?
Sure.
Yes. excellent.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
So if everybody read the minutes, then this goes really quickly.
I'll
Um,
entertain a motion to approve the minutes as written.
All four?
All four?
three.
All
There's
three.
3. July 17th, September 5th, and September 19th.
Yes.
Second?
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
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 Okay,
Thank you. Now I won't get an angry email from the town clerk.
great. I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.